a tiny little Japanese maple here. It's one of the Acer palmatum dissectum cutleaf, which variety, but it's a weeping tree, and it was a graft. And what they do here is they take a standard Acer palmatum and they cut it, and then they graft all these onto the top, and that gives you a really expensive weeping tree. But you got to be careful, because all these little bits that are trying to come back, I need to get my cutters for the better part of this. All right, that's the way it's supposed to look. Clean up that cut right there. Broke a stub there. But all these sprouts that come off of the rootstock should not be there. So just get a little bit of sun scald. And interestingly, they planted it with the burlap. Now, a lot of people say, oh, it's okay, leave the burlap, leave the burlap. I disagree. I think that burlap plantings, you should take, or at least score the burlap and get as much of it out of there as you can. Because what's happening here is this area of the burlap is keeping this part of the trunk constantly moist. And it's going to develop basal crown rot, just as if this thing was planted too deep. And this very well may be planted too deep. It's hard to tell with the burlap bag there. So somebody spent a lot of money on this little tiny specialty plant, only to have it going downhill through misunderstanding. I won't say neglect, it's misunderstanding. So I tore off the burlap that was clear, and it's got really solid cord down here. And if you've watched any of my videos about things that get tied up and put into bondage, you can guess what's going to happen in just a few years. As this trunk develops, it's going to get completely, totally constricted by this rope here. So if you look closely, you can see that it was buried all from here down to here, at least 4 or 5 inches. And I cut out all the cords that were in there. I tore out all the burlap. And realistically, this thing should be dug up and replanted at the appropriate level. Japanese maples are very, very sensitive trees. You know, if you plant them too deep, this thin bark will decay quickly. And just because of the improper depth that this was planted at, the life of this plant is definitely going to be shortened. So I left a little bit of a berm around here. And that's really not the best thing either, because now when you fill it up with water, it's got water sitting on the trunk and seeping down. But I'm not going to spend the time of transplanting this for her. It's also important to recognize that this type of a plant likes partial shade. And it's pretty hot out here. That one over there, you can see all the leaves are starting to tinge, they're starting to burn. And that's because this plant likes a bit more shade. You know, a lot of the Japanese maples are super sensitive plants, and you've got to get the right planting environment. So this looks like this broke off here. I don't know if it had more of this type of growth on it, but it's a weeping plant now. And let's see if I've made things a little better. So that led me to think, well, better take a look at some of the other Japanese maples. Yep, that one's too deep too. You want to plant so that the root flare is right at the grade. If you plant it too deep, even just a few inches too deep, water and moisture and soil on the trunk will cause that trunk to degrade. We call that basal crown rot. The wood from the trunk of a tree is very different than root wood. This tree also should be either excavated out and brought to the proper level, which I recommend that, or transplanted. This might have been in the ground too long for that, and it's probably got a bigger root system. I'm not even going to dig that one, but I'm guessing the same is going on over there. They planted a small, this looks like a Magnolia solangiana. This appears to be planted appropriately. You can see the roots right there, and it's not planted too deep, so I'll give them an A on this one. However, it is planted a little bit crooked, and you see that it's still pretty loose in the soil. So I would have planted it just back a little bit, or put a stake over here and kind of trained it back, so that in the early developmental stages, you can really do a lot, to establish a plant. You forget about it, it's always going to be a leaning tree. So he planted a couple of, I say he, the landscaper that was working on this, he planted a couple of maples over here. Not exactly certain which cultivar, but you can see what's happening here. The nursery stake was left on, and I can't really blame the landscaper because sadly he passed away. But if you leave these stakes on here, I can feel it goes up and in and up and in. I'm going to cut all of these right now. And I don't believe that the stakes are going to hold the tree up anymore. It should be staked out here and at least one loose tie. But when you have it like this, as the tree develops, you end up getting, this whole side of the trunk is going to be damaged because it's been rubbed on. You can see closely right here. Let's see, let's make a little, there we go. You can see the damage that's happening to the trunk already, just because they forgot to take the nursery stake off. You should always take the nursery stake off when you plant it. There we go. Much better. Much, much better. Let's see. I can feel it's going in, and I can feel an indent down here and down here. I think we got it in time before it was too far gone. And over here, you can see if this was left on here another year, there would have been a significant step. And we caught it before it caused too much damage, but there's a little bit of damage from that. It's a young enough plant. The trunk does have a little bit of a curve to it, so by restaking it over here and pulling it just a little bit beyond and letting it sit for like a year, then when you untie the stake, it'll go back and it'll be straight. But better the way it is when leaving the nursery stake. Nursery stakes are not appropriate for training or reestablishing a straight trunk. And I got this little tiny guy. Very slow growing tree. Must have wanted a Christmas tree or something out in front there. Maybe they're going to decorate it someday.